part two of this three worlds model. And again, I encourage you to take a look at the page around this video and understand that. Also, to pull out the book that is one of our textbooks, this book here, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth by Fee and Stewart. It's a very good book, and it deals really well with this idea of the three worlds model, though it uses different terminology. Where we have the literary view or literary world I spoke of in the previous video, and in this video talking about the historical world, Fee and Stewart refer to that on page 27 as this first task. It's a two-part task that he refers to as exegesis, and I'm just going to throw that word out there because it's one of our vocabulary words, and it has to do with this mode of interpretation. So I'll leave it there. But taking the literary world and what is said in the text, and then beginning to understand it through the historical lens that helps bring it from 2,000 years ago or farther into our present world, is an important piece of coming to understand the context of this passage, that whatever it is that we are looking at. So, for example, when it comes to places or the geography, the who's and the whens, because Matthew was writing about a person, Jesus, who lived in the first century. He was a Jewish rabbi living in Palestine, which is quite different than being a 21st century North American person living here in this country in this time with all of our technology and all that we have. And so sometimes the culture of that day gets lost, and some of what happens in the text kind of we miss it, or it confuses us, or we think it doesn't apply. And none of those need to be the case. So, for example, what we want to do is find some other tools, and we have some videos for you to watch here on the site. There are lots of helps in your Bible, that New Annotated Oxford Bible that you have. Has many helps in there to give a better sense of some of the context historically for the Bible, and the book of Matthew in particular that we're looking at. I'll make a point using a different book, though, say out of the Gospel of Luke. There's a very familiar passage, maybe you've heard of it. It's called the Parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan is a good story for us because it's very illustrative of how we need to understand the historical context in order to find the full meaning of what Jesus was getting after. The story that Jesus begins to tell the folks that day was about a man who walked from Jerusalem to Jericho. And simply put, you and I probably have never been to Jerusalem, and if we have, we've never walked to Jericho. So what is Jesus trying to portray here simply by setting his story in this setting? If we don't understand the geography, we don't understand the setting, we're going to miss part of what is happening here. Also, in the midst of the story, you may know the story, how a man is robbed and left beaten along the side of the road. There are three passerbys who are part of the story as well. First is a priest, second is a Levite, and third is a Samaritan. Now, what those words meant in the first century probably gets lost on most of us. We might know a little bit about what a priest is because we have some similar connotations with priests in current church structure. A Levite, we don't have a clue about. Maybe is that someone who wears Levi's? We don't know. And a Samaritan, well, we don't really have a clue about what a Samaritan is either. We got a good impression because we've heard this story before, and we know that this particular person, this good Samaritan, comes through at the end. And so we might have a positive image of Samaritans, but we really don't know what it means to be a Samaritan. And so those are important pieces for us to begin to break down. It helps lend to the surprise that is kind of embedded in the story, and without that understanding of who these people are, the surprise gets lost on us, and the power of Jesus' story gets lost on us. Simple little things also, similar to that, when the Samaritan does deal with the wounded man on the side of the road, he pours oil and wine upon the wounds. I've never poured wine on a wound. The hospitals today don't pour wine on wounds. Why would he do such a thing? Again, part of the culture and the history to understand what he is doing in that point. And also another small piece that helps with our historical understanding. It says at the close of the story that the man left 2 denarii with the innkeeper to take care of the man. Now clearly that's some sort of money, but I don't deal with denarii, and I don't think that you've ever dealt with denarii. So is that a little bit? Is that a lot? Is that what kind of a means of exchange? How can we begin to take those words that are biblical and historical from a couple thousand years ago to make sense in our current day today? That's really the task of the historical worldview, to take what the literary worldview sees, understand it through this historical lens, so that we can then begin to move it and apply it to our current situation. And we'll talk about that in the next video when we come to this idea of the contemporary world. The contemporary world is the third and final piece of this 3 worlds model. So I'll see you in the next video in just a moment. Okay?